Hello and welcome to another episode of Around the World in 80 Teas. My name is Sharon Hall and I'm the Chief Executive of the UK Tea and Infusions Association, and today we're going to talk about iced tea with my co-host Will Battle and our guests Jem McDowell and Lyndon G. Jem joined the tea industry back in 1984 with Lipton, which is part of Unilever, spending time in the UK, Sri Lanka and Malawi, as well as travelling in tea to more than 50 countries worldwide. Since January 2000, Jem has lived in New York, working as a tea importer for Universal Commodities, serving the North American tea market. Lyndon G is a food futurist, food and health writer, media commentator, international consultant, and parliamentary advisor. He also calls himself a bon vivant with a healthy appetite for life. Yeah, welcome, absolutely. Lyndon. And of course, my co-host Will Battle of Fine Tea Merchants Limited is a UK-based tea wholesaler with 25 years of experience in the tea industry, but he's also the author of the World Tea Encyclopedia, which I highly recommend you read. Will, Jem and Lyndon, welcome to this episode of Around the World. So, did you know that the majority of tea that's produced in Argentina is used in the US for iced tea? Of the 75,000 tonnes of tea that are produced each year there, 55,000 tonnes are exported to the United States. Their tea is prized for not clouding when it's cool, which makes it perfect for iced tea. So, Jem, tell us, when was tea first grown in Argentina?
Well, the first recorded plantings were in 1945, thanks to the post-war migration from all parts of Europe after the war. And just to the north, Brazil, in fact, had a Japanese migration. The tea seeds that brought into Argentina were allegedly by a European priest and an Eastern European priest, I beg your pardon. The types of bushes he brought were probably from Georgia or Azerbaijan in the former Soviet Union. And these were not great types of tea. They didn't produce a great quality or a great yield, but gradually the farms were established, and importantly, for later years, as we will find out, tea was planted alongside other crops. These days, 100% of those bushes have been replaced with vegetatively propagated or cloned bushes, which have a very good yield, but this is reduced by a short season of only six months, as well as poor husbandry and farming practices and infrequent harvesting intervals. There was a big expansion in the mid-50s from about 7,000 hectares to over 30,000 hectares as more migrant farmers arrived. And then there was another expansion in the early 70s from 30,000 hectares to 40,000 hectares. And this was due to a sort of geopolitical disagreement between Latin America and outside economies, so that the Ceylon tea, which was being imported into Chile, was replaced by Argentine tea. So the Argentine producers did very well indeed. And from then on, the industry has been pretty much the same, around 40,000 hectares. It's not a traditional origin with the great traditions of Ceylon or Assam or China or Japan. But as you mentioned, Sharon, it's very important to the US.
So can you tell us a little bit more about production of tea in Argentina and perhaps what else is grown there?
Yeah, absolutely. The Argentine province of Misiones, the economy is relatively undeveloped, and it's one of Argentina's poorer provinces. Situated in the far northeast, Misiones is surrounded to the north, west, and east by three rivers: the Iguazu, the Parana, and the Uruguay. And to the south, a low, wet, almost swampland in Corrientes, and Misiones itself is almost an island. The weather is hot and subtropical, rainy in the summer, which runs from November to April, and cooler and drier in winter, and that's May to August, with occasional light frosts. September, October can be very, very hot and humid before the rains break. And that's very similar to Southern Africa, where tea is grown, like Malawi and Mozambique. Agriculture is an important contributor to the local economy, and the chief source of agricultural income is yerba mate. Misiones is the world's leading producer of mate, around 250, 260,000 tons a year, and most of which is consumed in Argentina. It's their cultural drink. Misiones was an important part of the Atlantic forest biome. However, over the decades, much of the forest land has been degraded and replanted with mate, a little bit of tea, and managed forests, which are those three with ecotourism make up at about 30% of the local economy. As well as mate, forest and tea, citrus fruit, tobacco, sugarcane, rice, a little bit of coffee and coconut are also cultivated. And if you are thinking of traveling to Argentina, there are some wonderful places to see up in Misiones. Iguazu Falls, it's one of the natural wonders of the world. And if you're a movie buff, the movie The Mission was filmed in San Ignacio, and you can still see the ruins. The tea manufacture itself is unspectacular, and it doesn't dominate the landscape as it does in like Ceylon or Assam. Or parts of China, but it shares some commonalities with other tea producing origins. It's low elevation, only 1,000 or 2,000 feet above sea level. Harvesting is commonly a lengthy 30 to 35 days between each harvest that they take, and it's all done by machines. Some of which are very, very crude, and they're a bit like the agricultural hedge cutters that you might see in the British countryside. And the results are sometimes similar with the sort of degraded, chopped up bushes that one sees. So generally speaking, the bush husbandry and farming isn't as sophisticated as many other tea origins, and the quality of the green leaf and the output suffer because of that. That said, and to be fair, these days producers are trying to improve the quality of their output. Some producers harvest every 2 or 3 weeks as opposed to 4 or 5, which is producing a better quality of green leaf and helps improve the quality of the tea they make. About 70 to 80% of the land with tea on is owned by small farmers. And these farms range from around 5 hectares up to 25 hectares, sometimes even 50 hectares for a small farmer, and which by global tea standards is actually pretty big. And importantly for Argentina, and I think this is where Argentina is different from other tea producers, the farms are generally multi-crop. Tea is just part of their farming business alongside the mate, a little bit of forest, some vegetables, some citrus fruit, some cattle. Of course, everyone has cattle because Argentina, other major export is steak, which is another delight of traveling to Argentina. So that's pretty much the landscape of the tea. Out of 75,000 tons of tea produced, 55,000 goes to the US for iced tea. The vast majority is made for tea bags, and about 80 to 85% of the output is Rainforest Alliance certified. So there is quite a eco-consciousness in Argentina. Eco-tourism is very important. The Iguazu Falls is in the middle of a big national park. They're trying to preserve the forest, although degradation is a bit of a problem, as it is everywhere. So its tea sits amongst other crops. It doesn't dominate, as I mentioned before. The tea factories themselves are very highly mechanized and very efficient. There is not a lot of labor which is involved in the making of tea. Whereas perhaps in Malawi or similar, you'd have 50, 60 people working in a tea factory, you probably have 10 in Argentina. So it's big scale, it's big throughput, but a very efficient business. As I mentioned, the weather, that's very similar to Southern Africa. The seasons are very similar. It's the reverse, of course, because it's the Southern Hemisphere. The structure of the business, lots of smallholders. They supply larger processors who process the tea. That structure is quite similar to China. So there's quite a lot of similarities between the different origins which have sort of coalesced in Argentina. Their harvesting intervals very similar to Georgia or Turkey, for example. So they sort of sit in a particular position in the world tea industry, but with their own characteristics. So it's a very, very interesting place. It's a lovely place to visit. The people are delightful. So I can highly recommend it, not just for tea.
And just to come back to that harvesting piece, and some of the other episodes of Around the World in 80Ts, we've talked about picking 2 leaves and a bud for a particular type of tea. And you said, the piece in Argentina is developing. Do we see a time when that machine harvesting is, efficient enough to just pick 2 leaves and a bud, or is development not going in that direction?
I think it will, up to a point. Japan makes very high quality tea. It's all 99% machine harvested. There are differences between the types of bushes they have in Japan and the types of bushes which are grown in Argentina. So, which, without getting over technical about it, makes it quite difficult to harvest 2 in a bud. However, I have seen leaf, which has been brought in, which is every bit as good as hand-picked leaf in Africa or other parts of Asia. So I think an improvement in machinery, an improvement in the harvesting intervals, can improve the tea a lot. In terms of getting close to that 2 in a bud. It'd probably be a little bit more 3 and little, a bit up, a bit down. It's much more difficult to control unless we go sort of super technical with laser levelers and all that sort of stuff, which that would be lovely, but lots of money to invest in those things. But there is definitely scope to replace our good old-fashioned hedge cutters with something a little more sophisticated. And slowly that's happening. Some producers are going for a sort of 15 to 20 day interval, and that definitely has improved the output. So
Jem, if I take an Argentine tea and bring it back over here and try and brew it in that's the traditional British way, and I pop a dash of milk in, I get something perhaps a little bit greyish and brown. But when I make it iced, it seems to be a revelation, and I get this lovely clarity. Can you explain how we have that quality in Argentine iced tea? And I think it's important to stress it is a quality, and I think it's something, Argentine tea has this wonderful characteristic, and it needs to be celebrated as a really quality tea in its own right.
I think so. Quality is a relative term, of course, absolutely, and you're 100% right. The fast growth, the coarse leaf, and the type of manufacture they make the tea with, gives the tea it gives the green leaf a little sort of watery content. It doesn't have the slow growth flavor and color development which other traditional teas in a good old British tea bag would give us, or you might get from a high grown, slow growing organic Ceylon or something like that, which we think of in traditional terms as high quality. However, the Argentine tea, with this relatively low level of polyphenols in the leaf, the tannin-like substances which we all read about, allows it to be iced with sugar and lemon, but not go cloudy. And that's very different from if you wanted to make an iced tea from a British tea bag or a seasonal Assam or one of the traditional teas, they will go cloudy because of the polyphenol content, which then, as it cools, as the lemon sugar added, then clouds and those soluble solids then precipitate in the liquor.
That's great. A great explanation. Is that measure of Assam quality is that it does cloud, isn't it? In a way.
Correct. Yeah, that famous creaming down and those gorgeous sort of thickness that you get in the mouthfeel, you just don't get in Argentina. Perhaps if we go to Sharon's Two in a Bud by machine harvesting and bush husbandry improves, perhaps things will change a little bit. I don't know. It may be something in the soil. It may be inherent in the bush types they have down there. But yes, one would hope that they don't destroy their own markets.
Yeah, but then we'd have to buy our iced tea raw materials from elsewhere and find them somewhere.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. There is always somebody who will step into the breach, as in fact Argentina did, during the 70s. So there you go. I did do a demo. Would you like to see some lovely Argentine iced tea?
Definitely.
Shall we do that? And in true Blue Peter fashion, I have one I prepared earlier. So as Will said, this is Will's making a well-known British brand of good quality British tea, and this is how you would make iced tea. So I prepared this over last night and put it in the fridge overnight, and you can see that it looks jolly bright and sort of orange, but it's a bit cloudy. And for the US markets, back in the 70s and 80s, iced tea in bottles was going to be the big thing. And one of the things that the soft drink companies wanted was that you were going to compete with cola drinks. You needed a red, clear color. So they looked around, and that's when Argentina really took off. And as a result, what you get from Argentina or something similar is a much clearer.
Oh yeah, you can see.
And this was the basis of the Argentine expansion into North America, in the US in particular. And you have to bear in mind as where we drink in the UK and in Canada and most other countries, hot tea, probably with milk, perhaps with sugar or spices or this thing. In the US, 85% of tea is iced or cold. So this is a huge part of the market. Since those 70s and 80s days, the market has expanded massively. And sure, you can get lots of different types of iced tea now, which do go cloudy. They are clouded, and that's part of the expansion of the market. But the core ingredient in the market these days is still Argentina. They still produce that reddish, clear liquor, which they like.
Thanks, Jen. That's fantastic. So, Ron, perhaps that brings me on to a question for you, Lyndon.
Yeah.
It is hugely popular in the US. Can you tell us a bit about how the trend for iced tea developed and evolved?
Well, I think it goes back to the trend for ice. As early as, I think, 1773 was the Boston Tea Party. So obviously there was a taste for tea at that point. But then I think in about 1806, a chap came up with the idea of shipping ice around the country, basically to cool products for meat packers, things like that. But it also went into bars and fridges. And it was hugely popular. They cut up massive great blocks of ice from the Hudson River or Maine, Canada, wherever, and ship it around. But it probably wasn't very suitable for putting in a drink. You don't really want a lump of the Hudson River floating around in your drink. However, you could chill down tea. So then I think it's about the 1850s when it actually became commercial ice makers that came into popularity. So I think from then you probably were getting iced tea. But I think the World Trade Fair kicked it off in 1904. It became a very popular drink. And it just expanded from there. And it was an easy to make drink. It was very cooling, especially in the hot south in the summer. Like we had earlier, we tried an Arnold Palmer, which was iced tea and lemonade. Very good drink, very Southern American. But I think that's probably what kicked it off, was the actual ability to get hold of iced. I think the first record of an iced tea was actually in Naples in 1830 or something. But so it's been a slow progression, but I think once it hits 1904, it went ballistic in the States particularly, and it's spread on from there. I think they've driven perhaps the popularity in other countries as well.
So if I look at the shelf, perhaps Jem, you can help on this. If I look at the shelf, I can sometimes see iced tea, I can see cold brew, and I can see cold infused. Can you just give us a sense of the difference between those three categories?
Yes, of course. So for the first one, iced tea, and they all pretty much result in the same thing, as a nice, refreshing glass of cold tea, which to us Britons is an anathema. But as Lyndon said, in the deep south, it's that is the drink. So for iced tea, the tea is brewed hot and then chilled either by pouring over ice or leaving overnight in the fridge. And that's what I did for my little demo earlier. Cold brew, the products which are specifically labeled as cold brew on the shelf, those have blends in which are specifically designed to brew in cold water. And then the cold infuse, these are where consumers will brew the tea in cold water, perhaps even leaving it in a refrigerator, and the brew is very, very slow. It tastes different to tea that has been made with hot tea, because the cold water extracts much less solids and flavors from the leaf. So it's a very mild drink, and it takes a pretty long time actually. But those are three basic differences. In the deep south, and I know this is to anybody with a food safety sort of knowledge, they have a thing called sun tea, where it's highly not recommended. They just pop the tea bag in a glass of water, leave it on the porch and in the sun or in a jug, and then they use that. And needless to say, lots of people sort of having warm water, festering away in the sun, get dicky tummy. So
yeah.
Really,
don't try this at home.
Don't try this at home, folks. Absolutely. But I think if I'm not stealing Lyndon's thunder, if you go down to the deep south, every family has their own recipe. They chuck fruit in it, they chuck stuff they grow in their gardens, and all grandma's recipe for iced tea. It's much more traditional than one might think, from the US, with being a young country and so on. So there's lots of traditions, and the amount of sugar that is put in these drinks, you have to see to believe. It is virtually in many of the diners and restaurants you go, a saturated sugar solution. It's almost a syrup. It's unbelievably sweet.
Well, I think Lyndon's going to show us some recipes later on where you
good.
don't have to add too much sugar to your drink. But I think, as Jem said, cold tea is a bit of an anathema to most people in the UK, but I think we're waking up to this. And to your point about having lots of different recipes, so much you can do with iced tea.
There is. Well, I think in the States, it's a huge proportion of the tea that they drink is iced tea. I can't remember the actual percentage. It's like 80% of tea consumed in the States is iced tea, not hot tea. So it just gives you an idea of how popular it is. But it's a hugely versatile drink, and as you can flavour it with all sorts of things, have your own recipe, and you can really adapt it to whatever you've got, whatever fruit is ripe. And I think we're sort of just getting used to having it now. But it's actually, I think, going to become a very popular drink because it's very healthy. It can be, if you don't put lots of sugar in it, it's very low in calories. You've got your polyphenols in it. It's so it's refreshing, hydrating, and it's not fattening. What's not to like about that?
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Lyndon, because to me, iced tea completes tea as a product, because it's the thing for post your workout or for sitting by the pool on your holiday.
Yeah.
Just as it's also the thing if you have it in the Ostfriesland tradition in a North Sea island in a stormy night with a little bit of cream on the top and some sugar. It's the perfect thing for a windswept, rainy evening. And the fact that tea can cover both of those sort of climatic conditions is fantastic.
It's
I think.
amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you can also not just add fruit, you can add spices to it. You might put some fresh ginger in there or some cardamom, that sort of thing. You can add a lot of different flavours and it really makes some very interesting drinks.
Yeah. It just speaks to the, as we've been saying in so many of these episodes, the versatility of tea and infusions, actually.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
what sort of foods would you pair it with, Lyndon?
I think, well, if you've got a sort of iced tea with lemons in it and things, I think it's just a very refreshing, summery drink. So an ideal thing for a barbecue. You can go into things like the sort of lapsang souchong, a smoky thing, which is very good with smoky barbecue food. If you make an iced smoky tea and have that with a sort of char grilled ribs or something, it's really lovely. But equally you could make something like an Earl Grey iced tea, and that's wonderful with an afternoon tea. Just have it when I make one with clotted cream and strawberries in it as well, and have that as it's almost like a liquid afternoon tea. It's wonderful.
Sounds amazing.
I mean, there's no end to the versatility. You can play around with a lot and make something for your personal tastes. That's what I love about it. Is you can make, and even when you've just made one jug of it, you can take it a number of different ways very easily by just adding something to the glass that you pour the same mixture into. So somebody might want it sweeter, somebody might want it more lemony, somebody might want it minty. It's very easy to adapt, and that's what makes it good. And it's also very reasonable compared to a sort of a jazzy sort of adult soft drink that you might buy in a bottle, which you could probably be paying £3 or £4 for. You can make masses of it for £3 or £4. Yeah. So it's a really good value drink as well.
Although you did mention alcohol there, and I think
Yes.
there's a potential to mix your iced tea with alcohol, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I mean, you can make a really lovely Earl Grey martini. I like that very much. We might make one later, you never know. But I'm also just topping it up with a bit of Prosecco, making a sort of slight fizz to it as well. But again, I'd probably put some citrus juices in with that as well. Make it sort of probably 60% tea, and then just a top of Prosecco gives it a lovely little fizz as well. And that works very well. I mean, you can infuse your spirits with tea as well if you want to have a stronger martini, but so it wouldn't quite be an iced tea, but it's a very good drink. So if you literally just infuse gin overnight with loose leaf Earl Grey tea or something like that, you end up with a very interesting spirit at the end of it that adds a new dynamic to all sorts of things. But just the basic, if you wanted to make a really fruity iced tea with some rum in it or something, it would give you a really tropical sort of flavour. And that I think is good as well. So you can take it to any country and any nationality. So whatever you were eating, for instance, if you were saying, well, we're having an American barbecue, yes, you can give it the deep sour flavour, or you can put some bourbon in it. But you could also equally take it into a sort of Japanese way, perhaps, or an Indian way by adding milk and cardamom. And so it's hugely versatile.
Yeah, it's endless possibilities, and the onus is on everybody watching this to go out and experiment, I think.
Yeah.
Feeling pretty thirsty for a lapsang scotch right now.
And I think in the echoing what Jem said earlier, in the true tradition of here's one I made earlier, we are just going to cut to a clip. Lyndon very kindly made us some iced tea, so we're going to show that to you now.
Today we're going to be looking at iced tea. It's a wonderfully refreshing drink, and it's so simple to make. Basically, make your favourite tea, whatever you like. If you like Earl Grey or black tea, white tea, whatever, make it as you normally would, put it in a big jug, let it cool down, and leave it in the fridge to get really cold. Then you basically need a couple of glasses and fill those up with ice. You need plenty of ice for this, it adds to it. Get some lemon, a sprig of mint. If you want to, you can squeeze a bit more lemon juice in it. I quite like the lemony tang. If you like sugar in your tea, or a sweetener, or honey, whatever sweetener you like, or if you don't like a sweetener, don't put it in. But I'm just adding a sprinkle. You can put it in when it's hot if that's what you want, but not everybody who has it wants sugar, so it's probably easier to make it without. And then simply fill it up.
It's a beautiful colour.
And there you have a basic iced tea. So, would you like to try that?
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
It's a very refreshing drink. Perfect on a hot day with a barbecue or a picnic or something.
Oh, it's great.
That is so refreshing.
It's so great.
And the mint is just the icing on the cake, isn't it?
Yeah, it's wonderful.
But
Really, really
you can
lovely.
play around with that, and you could add lime or orange or any other sort of fruit you liked. It's up to you. Play with it, make it. It's just so easy. Or you can make the whole big jug with the ice and the lemon and the mint in and just pour it out for people as well. But you can make it well in advance. You can make it the day before if you wanted to leave it in your fridge. So it's very easy.
Super refreshing and go really well with your summer barbecue, wouldn't it?
Yes, definitely. And for non-drinkers, it's a nice drink to have. It's low calorie. If you don't put sugar in, it's very low calorie as well. So that's one of the best things about it. Is it's not like a fizzy drink where it's just full of sugar. There's only a little in there if you want it.
Yeah. It's absolutely delicious.
It is, isn't it? You've got this beautiful clarity, and it's a wonderful take on tea on a hot day.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Hello, we're going to make iced tea today with a little difference to it. It's named after the famous American golfer called Arnold Palmer, who pulled this together in the 70s, I believe. It's also widely known across the States, often called a half and half, because it's half lemonade and half tea. But Arnold Palmer actually liked a third lemonade to 2/3 tea. So that's the classic one we will make. Again, it's very easy. You start off with your tea. You brew the tea however you like it. You let it cool down. You leave it in the fridge in a jug till it's really cold. You need a couple of glasses, some lemons, a little sugar if you like. But the lemonade, this is traditional lemonade, which is just lemons, water and sugar. You can buy this or you can make it. It's very easy. But that has got some sugar in it, so you probably don't need to add any more. So, just start off very simply. A couple of nice glasses, very large ones. I'm making a sort of long drink here, really. Just some lemon. Again, you can squeeze more lemon into it if you want. Mint is optional too, but it does add colour and it adds a lovely flavour. I'm not going to add any more sugar because we already have some in. So let's start off with about a third of lemon, old-fashioned lemonade. And I'm going to top that up with ice cold tea. You can see the lemonade just sitting in the bottom, so I'll just give it a stir. And there you have an Arnold Palmer, a very refreshing citrusy tea drink.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, wow.
That's really refreshing, isn't it?
That's super
It has a
refreshing.
really lovely tang. And it goes nicely with the tannins in the tea and the lemon. And just sort of, I think you can actually have that with a fish dish or something. I think
That's a great
it would work
idea.
really well.
And it's sweet, but not too sweet, is
No.
it? The citrus really balances that out.
There's that nice combination of the lemon and then the sort of mild astringency of the tea.
Yes.
It really works well, doesn't it?
It's really super.
Absolutely.
Well done, Arnold Palmer.
Yes,
I
I
say.
think
Just picking up on something Lyndon said about the weather and hot weather, cold weather. North America, of course, has exceedingly hot summers, freezing winters. So iced tea in the summer with fruits and all the bells and whistles, etc. And then hot tea in the winter. It's the perfect beverage.
I think that's a great place to end today's episode. I would really like to thank our guests, Jem and Lyndon, and my co-host, Will Battle. Thank you for tuning in to Around the World in 80 Teas. We will see you again soon.